Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, happy Friday. It's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs Co. Coming up tonight, the rich list is out. Guess how many billionaires we have in this country? 171 of them. Many people saying it's time for them to be taxed even more. Is it? If so, how much more? And speaking of more, would you be prepared to pay more, £120 to be precise, on your energy bills to try and save the planet? And dogs, do you have one? If your dog is out of control and it kills somebody, what should the penalty be to you? Another man has been killed by a dog today. I say that if it's you, you're the owner of said dog, you should face maximum life in prison. Yeah, harsh or not? Currently, it's 14 years. And are you happy? Are you happier now than you were this time last year? I'll be looking at the happiest places in this country. Is your area one of them? Don't go anywhere. We'll have it all, but before we do, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. The man behind a website used to con victims out of more than £100 million has been jailed. TJ Fletcher is the founder of Icebook. The site was brought down last year in the UK's biggest fraud sting. It allowed criminals to appear as if they were calling from official firms, like banks, to steal money from their accounts. The 35-year-old has been sentenced to 13 years and 4 months in prison, while Detective Superintendent Helen Rance from the Met's Cyber Crime Unit says it was obvious Fletcher didn't care about the harm he was causing.
Before it was shut down, Icebook was constantly growing, with 700 new users registering every week, and it was earning £80,000 per week. Fletcher was leading an extravagant lifestyle, benefiting from the profits, having no care for the misery he was responsible for.
The parents of a disabled teenager jailed for gross negligence manslaughter have had their sentences increased. Kaylee Titford, who was morbidly obese and bedridden, was found dead at her home in Newton in 2020 after suffering from an infection. While her mother, Sarah Lloyd-Jones, who admitted the charge, has had her term increased from 6 to 8 years. And her father, Alan Titford, who's pleaded not guilty, will now serve 10 years in prison. The brother of TV star Philip Schofield has been jailed for 12 years for child sex offences. Timothy Schofield, who was a civilian police worker, committed 11 offences between 2016 and 2019. Outside Bristol Crown Court, Detective Inspector Keith Smith said the boy, who was abused by the 54-year-old, showed remarkable bravery in coming forward.
It's important to stress that before the allegations were made to the police in December, there were no prior complaints or allegations made about the defendant, and his former colleagues are horrified for the offences for which he's been convicted now. We want to be absolutely clear. We're on a mission to root out all of those who betray the standards and the values we are committed to uphold.
Boris Johnson's wife, Carrie, is pregnant with the couple's third child. The couple announced they're expecting a sibling for Wilf and Romy in just a few weeks. Well, Carrie said she's been feeling pretty exhausted for much of the last 8 months, but they are looking forward to welcoming the newest member of the family soon. A 21-year-old man has pleaded guilty to plotting a gun attack at Speaker's Corner in London's Hyde Park. Edward Little was arrested last September whilst in a taxi carrying thousands of pounds of cash. Well, earlier this year, he denied preparing to commit acts of terrorism, but he's now changed his plea, admitting the charge at the Old Bailey. He'll be sentenced in July. The chairman of Tesco is stepping down from his role. The company says that allegations over John Allen's personal conduct risk becoming a distraction to the supermarket. The 74-year-old has been accused of 4 incidents of inappropriate or unprofessional behaviour. He's denied 3 allegations and has apologised for the 4th. Well, the supermarket said it made no findings of wrongdoing. The US has announced new sanctions on Russia targeting future energy revenues and military supply chains. Well, it's part of a wave of fresh punishments over the war in Ukraine, which have been announced by G7 leaders meeting in Japan. Earlier, the UK said it would be banning imports of Russian diamonds, copper, aluminium and nickel. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president, who's due to attend the G7 on Sunday, has urged leaders at the Arab League summit to help protect his country. Volodymyr Zelensky called out those who may have a different view on Russia's invasion, saying he hopes for a united front against what he's called illegal annexations and the forced deportation of civilians.
I'm sure that we can all be united in saving people from the cages of Russian prisons. Unfortunately, there are some in the world and here among you who turn a blind eye to those cages and illegal annexations. And I'm here so that everyone can take an honest look. No matter how hard the Russians try to influence, there must still be independence.
The UK's semiconductor industry is being given a massive funding boost. The government's promised a £1 billion investment over the next decade, which it says will create more jobs and opportunities. Well, the move is designed to reduce the country's reliance on China for essential microchip supplies. Mick Jagger's daughter Jade has been ordered to pay almost £2,000 for attacking a police officer on the Spanish island of Ibiza. The 51-year-old was arrested on Wednesday after an altercation in a restaurant. She has agreed to pay fines for resisting authorities and causing minor injuries, as well as £700 compensation to the police officer. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Michelle.
Thanks for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the PR consultant Alex Dean and the broadcaster Matthew Stadlen. Good evening, gents.
Good evening.
Welcome to you both. You know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us. It's very much about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? Get in touch all the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Before I get into the show tonight, I do just want to get a couple of bits off my chest, if you will indulge me. First up, whilst browsing on my telephone this morning, a video caught my eye. I'm going to play it for you now with a massive caveat, because what you're going to see on your screen right now is just a load of blairiness. You're not going to be able to make head nor tail of it. So I shall explain. Basically, it's these three kids filming themselves for TikTok that have decided to, they think it's a stunt. And what they do is they walk into this random house, as they call it. They let themselves into, they go up the stairs. There's a lady there, presumably the homeowner, doing her gardening. They go into the house. The lady is obviously very frightened. She calls for her husband. A little kid is behind the husband. And these guys just walk around like they absolutely own the place. One of them goes and has a little settle down on the sofa until they eventually think that it's funny and leave. And I've got to tell you, listeners and viewers, I was absolutely disgusted when I saw that video. You can see the fear in these homeowners' eyes. It's in the middle of the day. It's very, very light outside, and I just do not know who these people think that they are. I wanted to play you the video with the homeowners blared out to protect their innocence, but showing you the faces of these kids, because I think actually if you want to behave like that, then you need to be named and shamed. But broadcasting rules do mean that I have to blare the faces of the minors, and of course to protect the homeowners, I have to hide them too. But I couldn't just not reference that on my show today. It is appalling. I don't know what is the matter with the youth of the day, and I know that that makes me sound like an old biddy, but I don't care. I then went on and saw a second video. You might have already seen it today. Look at this. This is the West Ham game. This is after the game over in Holland. What you're seeing now is the violence that broke out at the end of that match. Some fella there, you can just about make him out at the top of the stairs. He single-handedly is fighting off these thugs. Knowsley, apparently, he's known as, this fella. Some people are saying that's not him. Knowsley's the one on the other stairs, because it was all kicking off. But anyway, when I saw the two videos, I couldn't help but wish to myself, those kids, I wish that they'd actually picked on the house of Big Knowsley. Then they might actually have had a consequence that would make them think twice about their actions. Anyway, it infuriates me. Ban TikTok. That's what some of you will be telling me. I'm sure you won't hold back your thoughts on that. Anyway, top story tonight. Sunday Times Rich List is out. Are you on it? Are you single? If you are, get in touch. We'll try and connect you with some people. Lots of fascinating talk going on about that today. Anyway, get this. The number of billionaires in this country has fallen. Yes, you heard that correct. There are now just, and I say just with a smile on my face, 171 billionaires. That is down 6 from 2022. Lots of conversation there about how much these people are taxed. Some, Matthew, saying tax them more, let's have a billionaire tax, etc. Where do you stand on it?
Can I just say I saw those two videos as well, and I was absolutely horrified by the first. And I've got a young child, and the idea of people of whatever age coming into my house when the door is open and my wife having to call me downstairs or upstairs with my child visible, my young child visible in the background, it's horrific. And I can tell you, I thought he was pretty calm, that homeowner. I might not have been as calm as he was.
Well, you're a street fighter.
Well, exactly.
You wouldn't want to break into young Matthew's house. You wouldn't emerge well.
As for Knowsley, you know what Knowsley made me think of? It made me think of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. You know, when they had to hold that pass against the invading Persians under Xerxes, the incredible bravery of those guys. You'll know that story. It
made me think of a few scenes that were perhaps not as cultured as that one, I shall confess. But anyway, when I saw those two videos, I just thought, these kids, they're doing this, they're terrorising people because they went to what looks like a very nice, salubrious neighbourhood. And I just think you can see that there's a woman there, and you're doing it because you're cowards. And you're doing it, by the way, for social media clout. I mean, what has this world come to?
The other thing that I've lived in London all my life, born and bred here, and on our street in a relatively affluent area of London, well, it's a very mixed area, actually, but there's a lot of affluence around. Drug dealing is absolutely rife. I'm starting to sound like an old fogey myself, but I don't want that around my son when he's growing up.
They're dealing drugs in the street.
They deal drugs. They do it in the back of their mopeds instead of delivering food. Sometimes they're literally delivering drugs. You can order it on a menu, that sort of thing. Right. Completely unacceptable. Yesterday, I saw someone who I was fairly confident was a drug dealer, and he had his engine running at about 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, if you're dealing drugs, that's one thing. I don't want you to be dealing drugs, but if you're going to keep your engine on and polluting my street for my kids, that is unacceptable.
So not just
So I went round the block. I asked him
antisocial.
to do it twice, which probably wasn't very sensible because he might have had a big knife or something, and he refused to do it. And the arrogance
You asked him to do what?
Turn his engine off.
Right.
Because it's against the law and it's polluting the street for all the
So
rest of it. Do you know, I called 999
So you ignored
after
the drugs and tapped on the window for idling?
And I called 999 when he refused to turn it off because I thought this is an opportunity to catch a drug dealer. Do you know how long it took to get through to the police?
How long?
4 minutes. 4 minutes. I could have had those kids coming into my house and trying to burgle my house or attack my wife.
I thought that was quite... I mean, there'll be a lot of people...
4 minutes to get through.
Yeah.
4 minutes to get through. Yeah, no, not 4 minutes to get there, to talk to the police.
Yeah, but
you
I
dial
think that
999.
will be... I think anyone that's had experience, perhaps, of ringing 999, I think that they might think that that is quite a fast response time for a pickup. I know you don't mean feet on the ground. I know you mean a call pickup.
I thought it was shocking, this, though.
Did you?
Because if that drug dealer had been attacking me or attacking my family or trying to break into my house, 4 minutes pickup time isn't going to help, is it?
So anyway, I need to know the end of the story now. So what happened? Did they come out or what?
Well, at that point, I went into my house and I thought I'm not going to do anything else to jeopardise the safety of my family, so I stayed inside after that, and I don't know whether they turned up. I didn't hear any sirens.
But I don't think people care. I know I'm supposed to be talking about rich people, don't worry, I will come back to that in a sec. I just don't think a lot of these young kids care, Alex.
They don't care about your view. I don't mean to personalise it. They don't care about our views. They probably don't care about the views of people watching this show. But they do care about how their social media content goes down. And the best thing that could happen would be people of their generation and people who do follow them on TikTok deploring their behaviour. That's what will make the difference, because people see this going well, and by going well I mean getting likes and lots of views, then someone will go on and do it again. If it's not a successful social media tactic, they'll give it up. I hate to sound crass about it, or too pragmatic, and of course in principle it's wrong, but the pragmatic answer is, if people don't like it, it won't carry on.
Problem is, lots of people will like it because a lot of people will find it in some sick way entertaining. I mean, you could even, it's an argument to be had about all these sorts of discussions we're having. There's an argument not even to have shown it in the first place. One of the real problems at the heart of this is, yes, there are some kids who are doing really bad stuff, but social media, and I use it a lot on Twitter particularly, but social media can, and we might talk about it later in the context of mental health, is a real danger because it gives people who want to do really nasty things to other people a platform on which to do it.
But what's gone wrong in society where your existence, your validation, your self-worth is coming from random strangers clicking like?
Well,
why?
I might put it the other way around and say that perhaps we've always had evildoers and evil wishers with us. We just see it more now because it's shared in content like this. And there are some people who are so amoral or so psychopathic, so sociopathic, disconnected from the views of those around them or uncaring about those views, that not only do they do something we might, all of us, objectively deplore, but think it's amusing to share the suffering of others. I have to say, I think that instinct has always been with us, but it hasn't hitherto been in such a shared format. You know, we had the shocking news that was shared in the earliest newspapers. That's what would sell, right? The worse the headline, the better. Jack the Ripper, appalling moments in London where women are afraid to go out at night, more newspapers sold than any time before or since in that era. Bad news sells, and this is just a different variation of that. It feels closer to it because you're seeing the actual individuals doing it. The stupidity of it is they're volunteering their own bad behaviour.
But where's the consequence? Why isn't that kid, because they'll know he is panicked now, little weasels, backtracked and deleted his account. I bet he'll be back up before long anyway. Why isn't he done for trespassing?
But the problem is that the police, and this is going to get political, have been cut to yes, they're starting to replace some of those they cut, but they've been cut to the bone under the Conservative administrations over the last 10, 13 years. 20,000 fewer police. Yes, they're bringing those 20,000 back, but our population has grown. There are all sorts of things that I witness on a day-to-day basis going about my lawful business in London, from mopeds cutting you up in the most appalling ways and dangerous ways, to people dealing drugs, to the sort of thing you saw in that video. I haven't witnessed that, thank goodness, that you want the police to be on hand because you don't want vigilantism. And by the way, I would suggest to viewers that in my position that I was last night, that they don't go and tell someone they think is a drug dealer to turn his engine on. It's not very sensible, but I get really annoyed. Just on Alex's point, it's a really interesting point. Are there more people doing bad stuff? Or were there always that many bad people in the first place? I think, broadly speaking, that people have been the same over the ages, but I do think this technology that is at our fingertips can encourage people to do things and to say things that their better selves would not have them say. And once we've all had bad thoughts.
I think you're giving them kids too much credit. I don't think they've got better selves.
I do. I think everyone does. I think everyone has a better self, but we've all had negative thoughts, we've all had nasty thoughts, we've all had jealous thoughts, whatever it is. But this technology allows us to press send, and instead of checking our worst selves, and therefore being, broadly speaking, a decent person, we're tempted to press send. So I think social media encourages more badness than there was in the past.
I know you want to move on. I just want to say one thing about what Matthew said about the police, because I'm not actually sure this is a partisan political debate. I think that you always get messages in when someone says anything negative about the police, but I'm a believer in the police. I'm a Conservative. I want to believe in the police and believe that they police us well. But I think that the decline in policing in this country goes well before 10 or 15-year period. And effectively, it goes to policing like we put out fires. Waiting somewhere until you get the call and then going to deal with it, rather than proactively being out in the community. And that's been a trend over a couple of generations of policing.
A few of you guys, you're surprising me tonight. Jim's saying, why wasn't the door locked in this house? Nigel's saying, well, why wouldn't people lock their door and put a chain on?
So I can answer that one, because they were gardening. It was the middle of the day, they were going in and out of the house.
The wife was gardening, going about her lawful business.
And hang on, in any other walk of life, that would be called victim blaming.
Yes, quite.
Because even, you know, yeah, I get you. OK, yeah, lock your door, whatever. But she was stood in the front garden, sweeping the garden, so she'd propped the door open. And you should be able, in this day and age, in the middle of the afternoon or early evening, whatever time of day it is, to be in your own front garden without locking your door behind you for that nanosecond. There's too many, particularly young kids, and is it getting worse, is it not? I certainly do not remember when I was a teenage girl, my peers walking around with zombie knives in their trousers. I don't remember as much kind of violence and all the rest of it. And I don't remember as much disdain and lack of respect for the police.
But
young
Michelle,
people today don't seem to care.
When we were growing up, I think you were brought up in London, and there were police stations that were open, right? We can choose who we blame, which party we blame for the shutting of police stations, but without a sort of safe centre in your neighbourhood, it makes everything feel less stable. I'm not a believer in a police state or over-officiousness, of course not, but living in a civilised society requires a balance, doesn't it? You want enough police and enough of a presence to act as a deterrent, and as Alex rightly said, you want community policing. Well, you talk about community, there'll be some watching that'll say, I'll tell you what, you need community service. That'll sort them all out. If all of the kids, when they were leaving school, had to do a year of something, you can have it as military service, you can have it as what you want, actually, maybe that might fix some of the problems in society. Anyway, look, we didn't get on to billionaires, so I'll do that after the break. Maybe we're just three old biddies sitting here out of touch with the youth of the day. What do you make to it all? Your thoughts on that? And when I come back, I'll get to the billionaires, I promise. Do you think we need to tax them more, yes or no? See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, I've got Alex Dean, the PR consultant, and the broadcaster Matthew Stadlen. Lots of you getting in touch about the whole situation about kids, what's going on. Pat says the kids are poorly educated and badly disciplined. I don't know, you know, because I'm not sure that this is just unique to just those kids that don't have discipline and just those kids that perhaps don't do well at school. I think this is a little bit more across the board. Many of you pointing out what would have happened if they'd gone to your house. I can't read any of those out on TV, but I think you get the gist. Brian says that prisons are to blame. They're not tough enough. They don't act as a deterrent for anybody in this day and age. Anyway, I mentioned billionaires, 171 of them. That's in decline from the previous year. Should we tax them more?
I'll just give you 2 figures, and I know we've argued about this on your show before, Michelle, but the richest 350 of us in this country are worth something approaching 800 billion. That is more than the GDP of Switzerland, right? So that's one figure.
Yeah.
The other figure, as we know from the news this week, that nearly 11 million of us are struggling to pay our bills. So I think cutting a little bit off those billionaires, they can still be multi-millionaires, they can still have hundreds of millions of pounds, but cutting a little bit off those guys will help ease the burden on those 11 million people. And I don't think it will disincentivise business, and it's an old Tory argument to suggest they'll leave the country. This is a great country. GB News celebrates the greatness of this country. People want to live in this country if they have to pay a bit more tax that is more proportionate to their wealth. I think that's a good thing.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear how much you like the channel, but the point you were making there about dividing the pie effectively rather than trying to grow the pie, how far the left has come since Peter Mandelson said he was intensely relaxed about people becoming filthy rich as long as they pay their tax. Now, making that last caveat vital, that is a reasonable left-wing thing to do. Saying you don't care if they're here or not and saying you don't care if they pay more, that is not. And that's why it's not a Tory argument.
I didn't say they didn't care, though, Alex, did I? I said they won't leave. So I do care. Of course we don't want them to leave, because we don't want to get in the way of business, because then you lose jobs. Of course we want them to stay.
You're blasé about it because you don't think they'll leave.
I don't believe that.
So let me just make the point that the data you're showing here shows it's gone down for the first time.
Yeah.
And Matthew likes statistics. The top 1% of this country pay 28% of all our taxes. Now, if you want fewer of them, it sounds to me like raising their taxes even further sounds like a good way to going about it. So notwithstanding your good motivations.
So my motivations involve, and I'm not struggling to pay my bills, but I would be, and I'm not a billionaire, obviously, I'd be prepared to pay a bit more tax in order to help those 11 million people who are struggling to pay their bills. The old phrase, you know, whether you're heating or eating, we don't want to live in a country, surely, where around the corner from where we live, and as I said earlier, I live in a very mixed community, socially, the demographics, where some people are literally not able to give their children proper food, because if they do in the winter, winter, they can't keep them
But
warm.
then did you just say you wouldn't?
If
You just say you wouldn't mind paying a little bit more tax to help those people?
Yes, and you'll next say, well, why don't I volunteer my
Yeah, so
money?
then why don't you
Because
voluntarily overpay your tax then?
This is what I explained to you on the show last time. It's not about me.
But you've just said, you made it specific to you, and you said, because this is what I think there's too many hypocrites in this society. You just made a statement that you personalised it. You just said to me, I would be happy to voluntarily pay more tax to help people. So then I point out to you, well, go on then, because you can. So why aren't you then?
I'll explain that in two ways. First of all, I do put money towards charity each year.
No, I'm talking about extra tax.
Secondly, even if I'm not sure that there is a mechanism in which you can pay the Treasury, but if there is, me giving a bit more tax to the Treasury, me on my own, is not going to make a difference. Let me finish the question, because you call me a hypocrite.
You could inspire a movement.
Maybe, I doubt it, because people don't instinctively do that. What I have done in my life, and if we have thousands and thousands of Matthews who are prepared to pay a bit more tax, it starts to make a difference. If Matthew does, it's a narcissistic thing. The final argument, and this is an important one, in every election in my life, and I couldn't vote Labour under Corbyn's leadership, I gave my vote to the Greens, but in every election in my life, I have voted for a party that is against my financial interests. Every single election of my life, it would have been in my financial interest to vote Tory. I want to vote in a party, and I don't know to what extent Keir Starmer will raise taxes, if at all, but I want to vote in a party which promotes a fairer society. So we don't have tokenism by little Matthews here on GB News, but everyone has to pay a little bit more who can afford to do so.
Your viewers may be saying Simpson-style stop, he's dead already. But let me say one thing, because I haven't said very much so far, and it's to address something you said. HMRC has a voluntary contributions account. Sometimes it's millions, sometimes it's rather less, but you can write a cheque to HMRC and they'll cash it.
Well, I'll go home and think about it, and I will ask the question on Twitter. But if we think in
the
real world,
I pointed this out to you last time, and this is what annoys me in this society. So I personally, I would prefer to pay the minimum amount of tax that I can legally get away with, and I think most people, if they're honest. Legally was the word that I used there. I want to make my fair contribution. I want to make my legal contribution. But actually, if this government actually received a bit less taxation, they might be a little bit more considered and more careful about how they actually spend it, as opposed to wasting an absolute small fortune.
These are very old-school Conservative arguments. At the moment, we have a waiting list, and we can debate the reasons, and I'll give you one of them in a moment, a waiting list on the NHS of 7.3 million. It means that people like our fathers-in-law or our mothers-in-law or our parents are waiting for 80 weeks for a back operation. If their loo happens to be on the first floor of their house, they have to crawl up the stairs. People are developing cancer while they are waiting for tests, not specific cancer tests, but the sort of tests that reveal whether some sort of symptom that isn't obviously cancer might actually be cancer. People are getting ill on the NHS. One of the reasons for that, obviously, is we've just been through a pandemic, which has created a backlog. We can debate lockdowns another time. Another reason is because, although you might argue that funding has gone up, in real terms, the Tories are underfunding the NHS. Yes, I'm sure that management can improve, but we need properly to fund our services if we want our relatives, those of us who can't afford private healthcare, if we want our relatives to be given the service that everyone, I think, in this country deserves.
And it comes back to fairness. Before I come back to you, Alex, a lot of people pay a lot of tax and don't actually or barely actually use the NHS because they've got private healthcare instead. So essentially they pay twice. But anyway.
That's nothing wrong with paying twice. People who choose to send their children to private school pay twice, and we should applaud that example. We should say, well done for taking your child, voluntarily paying for them for whatever reason, whatever motivation, might be religious, might be that child needs special attention that you think they might not get in the state system, might just be because you think it's going to be a better school. But you've chosen to pay for that child's place, and you've also chosen to continue to, because you're a taxpayer in this country, you are also paying for the place for other children in society. Equally, I pay tax that goes to schools, even though I don't have children, and that's fine by me. Right? I think all of those things are reasonable. On the other hand, when it comes to things like private healthcare or private schooling, I do think there should be an element, not the whole thing, there should be an element of tax deduction. Parenting is hard, it's the job of a lifetime. Healthcare is very challenging, it's the thing that worries us the most. I'm not saying the state should take care of everything, but it could be made a little bit easier and encourage people a little bit to do that, and I'd be all in favour of it.
Yeah,
and I think you get a lot more people sending their children to private school and a lot more people voluntarily paying for healthcare.
Just on the billionaire question, which is the question you set us at first, I'm not one for the politics of envy. I don't resent...
Really?
No, I'm not. And I'm relatively well off
You
myself.
do a good job of masquerading.
No, not at all. I don't... you want to put me in my box because the argument is inconvenient to those who do have money. I want those who have the broadest shoulders to be able to support those who don't have the broadest shoulders, often through no fault of their own. It's part of the contract, as Alex suggests, that we all have with a society. Because it's great to have money, but it's also great not to live next door or up the road from someone who can't heat their house, because if they heat their house, they're not going to be able to feed their children. It's about being a civilised society.
Yeah, and just for the record, I don't want anybody to be in that situation. I don't want any member of society to be in a situation where they cannot feed their homes or whatever. Sorry, feed their children or heat their home. I don't want that at all. I just push back on because I just think it's a bit of hypocrisy. People will sit there all the time and say, I'd pay more, I'd pay more. Well, go pay. If you are sitting at home, agree with Matt, go and pay more tax voluntarily.
Everyone who said it did it, but Mike set a tremendous example. Imagine the virtue signalling. I mean, the most positive way. No, because I don't share your ideology of the fact we should share more tax.
It's not an ideology.
But if you think we should, put your money where your mouth is.
My argument against that is that instinctively, obviously, it is harder for people voluntarily to make payments to the Treasury than it is psychologically.
It's really
if
not
we
that
are forced
hard.
to by law. I pay all my taxes, obviously I do. I've paid a lot of tax in my lifetime. I'm prepared to be asked to pay a bit more. If I make a symbolic gesture and give a bit of money to the Treasury and then tweet about it, that's going to help no one.
It will, because you might inspire an army of givers.
I don't think it would, because I don't think it's in human being psychology. However, voting for a party that will force everyone to pay that little bit more so that we can spread the wealth of this country more effectively than we do without discouraging people from doing business here. We don't want to do that. I think we'd be better off.
The difference is, I already think we're taxed too much. You think we're not taxed enough.
Less than a lot of European countries.
You think we're not taxed enough. And if you think that, then you can make a difference now. And you don't. And it's only one more payment. You don't need anything.
Alex, we all can. You can too. We both.
Yes,
but I don't want to, and you do.
Yes, but I think you should want to. I think we should all want to contribute more. Yeah, and that's part of the problem. That's why he's trying to call me a hypocrite. Because you don't want to pay more tax.
I don't think I was trying to, Matthew.
See, this is honestly, I shall sum up. If you are somebody in Matthew's camp who wants to pay more, who thinks that everyone should pay more, don't just sit there in your house, on your sofa, on your TV sets, wherever. Get online and make a voluntary payment. Maybe.
I'll tell you what, I'll pay a bit more in tax. I'll pay a bit more in tax if you both pay a bit more in tax. How about that?
I am very clear in my communication, and I just clearly pointed out, I want to pay the minimum amount of tax that I legally have to. That is my position.
Then we live in a society where 11 million people are struggling to pay their bills, where there's a waiting list in the NHS of 7.3 million.
And I don't mean to be rude, but I don't mean to be egotistical, but I pay an awful lot of tax as it is. So actually, if you take my contribution, and then you look at actually what I take from the state, I am contributing quite a lot of money to help people, and I'm comfortable with the amount of money that I contribute. But if you're not comfortable, you sit there and you say, I want more, I want to pay more. Don't just sit there and tell me you want to pay more. Get off your backside. I'll send you the link and actually pay more.
I think we should vote for a fairer society, Michelle.
Well, I think I should go to a break. That's what I think. Anyway, I will take a break. When I come back, I will have some of your response on that one. Don't go anywhere. See you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you right through till 7 o'clock. Matthew Stadler and Alex Dean still alongside me. Simon has been in touch. The argument of paying more tax is already there. It's called VAT. If you've got more disposable income, you spend less, you pay an extra 20% on everything, so the Treasury does get more money. Lots of you. My simple question to you is, would you voluntarily pay more tax? And if you would, why aren't you doing it then? Darren says, if just one billionaire leaves the country, then you would lose a lot of tax income. Michael says, no, leave the tax alone. We don't want them to tax them out of the country. Lots of you kind of agreeing.
We're much less
taxed
than other European countries. Quite a few other European countries.
Yeah, but so what? You don't live in those countries. Talking about this country.
Because we live in a world and we live in a continent. We don't just live in our own little echo chamber. So it's quite useful, I think, to compare ourselves to other countries.
Anyway, right, let's move on from tax, shall we? Energy. Talking about paying more, though, there's a theme. Can you see that emerging yet? Would you pay nearly £120 a year more to help the climate, to help fund things like hydrogen gas, etc.? This is, of course, all about net zero. Quick yes or no to you?
Very quickly, I'm not an expert on hydrogen. I don't know whether that's the right solution. But yes, I would, in principle, be prepared to pay more. But it comes back to that other thing. I absolutely don't think it should be a blanket increase across the board, because how can we possibly be asking those 11 million people who are already struggling with their bills to pay even more? Those who can afford it should help to fight climate change. We've got an emergency. We don't want to have even bigger migration problems than we have at the moment.
Alex?
I think we've got this policy debate the wrong way round. I think that when you insist people have to have their boilers taken out, they have to have a heat pump put in, when you say it's going to cost you X much more, it naturally disincentivises people from listening to the agenda you have and thinking, how am I going to cope, as Matthew was saying. If you want to do things like this, in the end, the honest thing for a government to do is do it out of direct taxation, where that's just where the burden falls, and you ensure that people don't wind up, as I fear is going to happen with this kind of thing, resenting the environmental agenda more and more. We're becoming too hair-shirt about it. We've asked people to do something very small, like recycling, they'll do it. But if you say you've got to take out your boiler mandatory, they don't like it.
Well, we were out and about asking the good folk of Birmingham today that very question. Would you be happy to pay more to help the climate? Here's what they had to say.
Well, I think for 120 extra pounds a year, that's £10 a month. I feel like that's the least that we can do if you want to save the planet that we live on.
No, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, the government have a responsibility. They've signed up to all those treaties, so therefore they ought to fund it.
As long as it wasn't too much, I think if everybody did it, it would be good.
No, I don't think I would be comfortable with that. No, I think if the technology's there, then bills will come down and support. But no, I think we've got to look after ourselves and look after mankind rather than paying higher prices for green energy.
Well, there you go. I'll let you be the final judge. 120 quid a year extra. Would you be up for it or not? And by the way, if you're one of these massive climate activists, volunteer yourself, get in there, overpay, pay even more. And if we manage a society like that, we might have a bit of a better society, right? If you're massively into these causes, pay a little bit more. And if you don't believe in it, you think it's all a little bit of all tut, this whole net zero thing, you wouldn't have
Michelle,
to do
you
it.
can't possibly think that the people who demonstrate for Just Stop Oil are wealthy enough to
don't
change
even get
the
me
climate
started on the
change.
people.
Come on.
Is that because they don't work?
Possibly, but they're not going to fix our net
There'll be some
zero
inherited
issues.
wealth, such as the nature
you may have noticed I don't go out trying to stop traffic. That's not my shtick, right? But the idea that people who particularly care about the climate, rightly so, have enough money to solve our issues is just pie in the sky.
Well, I don't know. Well, I do know, actually. I've got very strong opinions about it. But if you step me off on another rant, I won't be able to talk about dogs. And I want to talk about dogs before I finish my show tonight, because very sadly, somebody else has, of course, today been killed by another dog, this time in Greater Manchester. It was a 37-year-old chap. And it's just got me thinking, the person, the owner of the dog, has been basically arrested for there was a dog basically dangerously out of control. Is on suspicion, I have to say, get that right. Now, listen, it's got me thinking, so it has. The maximum sentence, basically, if your dog, behaves, is out of control, it results in a death, the maximum sentence is 14 years. I do not think that's sufficient, and I think the maximum sentence should be life in prison.
Well, I mean, the minimum sentence for murder is 15 years. So, I mean, there's not a huge disparity.
No, maximum.
No, I know. I'm just saying there's not a huge disparity between being out of control and your dog killing somebody, the upper end of that sentence, being at the lower end of deliberately killing somebody. Right? So it's not completely out of the realms of robust sentencing already. But your point might be an argument for, raising the limit by a year or two. But I'm not sure that really deters people from owning dogs or having those dogs being out of control. I do bear in mind the fact that the Dangerous Dogs Act, passed in a long, hot summer of parliamentary overexcitement and many news headlines and tabloid coverage, led to some of the most terrible legislation we've passed in this country, which, there were plenty of dogs that were completely harmless, that were destroyed, plenty of breeds that were put on banned lists completely unnecessarily. In the end, my point is we mustn't... Terrible thing that's happened in Greater Manchester, but it is completely wrong to overreact, pass bad legislation or bad sentencing policy and result, in the end, with something you have to live with for years that's completely out of proportion.
Well, I still think it's a good idea. What do you make to it, Matthew?
I'm afraid I agree with Alex. I think it's also a really difficult crime to prosecute successfully, and circumstances obviously are going to dictate the sort of sentence if someone is found guilty. If your dog, otherwise well-behaved, suddenly goes rogue when it's off its lead in an area where it's allowed to be off its lead in a park, for example, and does something horrific and kills someone, does that mean that you should go to prison for 14 years? I think it is so case-specific, and as Alex says, I don't think we should overreact, which is not to belittle the utter horror of what we've just heard.
Yeah, do you know there was some analysis done on dogs? I am not a dog person, by the way. I don't really like dogs, by the way. I
think that was obvious, actually, from the way that it started, Michelle. No offence.
Yeah, I'm not really into dogs. Anyway, there was some analysis conducted about how aggressive favourite breeds of dogs are, the prevalence of aggression in each breed. A Rottweiler, I am astonished it was as low as this, 7.46%. I thought it would be much higher than that. A Chihuahua, I always thought they were quite cute, but I've got a picture of one kind of snarling away. It does not look that cute. 4.2%. Labrador, 2.24%. A Pug, 1.97%. A Greyhound, 1.7%. And this looks quite cute to me, even though I don't really like dogs. Golden Coated English Cocker Spaniel, 12.8%. Really?
But there aren't that many people being killed by Cocker Spaniels,
well,
so I'm not sure how helpful...
And I'm basing this
there may be lots of nipped fingers, Michelle, but I'm not sure there are many people savaged to death by Cocker Spaniels.
It's not my research.
No, I know.
2 or 3 years ago, I would have agreed with you. I was absolutely not a dog person. I live in London. People in London are not particularly dog-friendly. And then I met my wife, and my wife had 2 working Cocker Spaniels, and if I didn't fall in love with the working Cocker Spaniels, I wouldn't have been able to live with my wife, and therefore I've fallen for the Cocker Spaniels, and I'm now a dog person, believe it or not.
Are you? Well, maybe there's hope for me then. Well, there you go. That was the picture that I was referring to as well, that I just popped up on your screen. Have you got a dog? What do you think about my little suggestion? I think it's a great one, quite frankly, but everyone else seems to disagree with me. Anyway, get your thoughts coming in. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I'm going to show a picture of your dog, actually, after the break, so don't go anywhere. And I also want to talk to you about, are you happy? Are you happier now than what you were this time last year? Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back. We were just talking about dogs before the break. Matthew, you were just telling us that you weren't a dog person, then you met someone, she's got dogs, and now you're a little bit of a dog person.
Look at these guys.
Let's have a little look at these.
That's pretty adorable.
Yeah, they are quite cute, actually.
How could you not love those dogs? And I tell you what, we've got a 7-month-old, and I can honestly tell you my wife loves our dogs as much as she does the baby, and she loves the baby a lot.
Can you just talk us through what those dogs are? Because there'll be people listening to the radio no idea.
So these guys are working Cocker Spaniels.
Right.
I would not have known the difference between different breeds of Cocker Spaniel 2 years ago. Now I absolutely do. You get show Cockers and all the rest of it. American Cockers, English Cockers. These guys are working Cocker Spaniels, which means that traditionally they would have gone out on hunts. They don't do that with us. But they love sprinting. The difficult thing for us at the moment, particularly with the baby, is that poor Sonny, the black and white one, who is the friendliest dog you will ever meet. I mean, they don't like people coming to the door. They do get protective.
Yeah.
But he'll kiss everyone. But he's just had double elbow surgery. So he's being in a cage for week after week after week. And he loves running more than life itself. So we cannot wait halfway through July when he's going to be able to go again.
Oh, right. And they make you happy, your dogs, I suspect?
Do, actually, because we're going to talk about mental health.
We are. That was
I had a big sort of mental health hiccup,
right,
to put it mildly, in 2020 during the first months of the pandemic,
right,
when I was convinced I was going to kill people by giving them COVID by mistake. And I became a bit of a recluse. This was before I started going out with my now wife. And having those dogs there made such a difference, because touch is really important, and giving love to other things, to people obviously, but also to animals, I've found really helpful for my mental health.
Well, there you go. The reason that we're bringing in mental health, by the way, I think I've got a little map that I can show you on the screen, because there's been some analysis done to look... Oh, by the way, yeah, cheers, I forgot. Dewberry Tavern is open.
Cheers,
Sorry.
Matthew.
Cheers, everybody. Happy Friday. I forgot that. Cheers to you at home as well, if your Friday evening has started early. Put that map thing, the graphic back up if I can get it. Look at this. This is the unhappiness levels that people were asked about. How is your happiness this time compared to last year? This time last year. Yorkshire and Humber there. My home county, 26% there. And I find some of these figures quite interesting. So this is the percentage of people that have said that they're less happy than they were this time last year. London, 36% less happy. East Midlands...
London's way out. The worst result by some way.
But that doesn't really surprise me,
No, me
actually.
neither, but it's really stark.
It surprises me because although pollution is very high in London and the crime appears to be high, in my anecdotal experience of it, actually there's so much fun stuff to do in London, but I guess you have to be able to afford to do it. But there's sport, there's theatre, there's opera, there's art, there's so many, and there's friends. You could go and have drinks and dinner parties and all the rest of it. London is an incredible, incredible city, but it seems like a lot of people are cut out of there.
Yeah, it's an incredible city if you can manage to avoid getting stabbed or mugged or anything like that. That seems to occur frequently, or more frequently, if you ask me, on the streets of London. Anyway, you guys have been getting in touch about your dogs. Owners of killer dogs should be jailed for life, says Terry. But what about Matt's point, though? You know, if it was just a calm dog and then it got out of control as a one-off. David said all dogs should be muzzled when around the public. Philip says a Chihuahua is not big enough to kill a man. It's the big macho breeds, he says, that they should stop breeding. Ian, he's, again, a fan of the muzzle outside of the home. Raymond says, how many people more have to be killed before these owners are stopped or brought under control? What sort of dogs are these that do lose control? I think you'll find it's a lot of dogs, actually. I don't think it's one particular thing. Matthew, I like you. You've said, I'm happier than I was a year ago because we've got GB News. Ken says, happiness is an evening spent with Dewbs Co. It's absolute bliss. Hey, we like that.
Smoothie.
Listen, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, how can I make myself happier? What can I do this weekend to lift my spirits? Have a look at these two. If this doesn't lift your spirits, I don't know what will, quite frankly. Nope, that's me. Well, I might lift your spirits, actually. Hang on. Hang on, are we going to get this? Yes, I'm trying to get you this video.
Come on, everybody! Come on, everybody!
Go on, lad. If you was listening, not watching, you don't know what's gone on, you have just missed some serious movers and some serious trousers. If you want to lift your spirits, get out and dance, gents. That's all I've got time for. Thanks for your company. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Cloud and some rain in the north this weekend, but fine elsewhere and plenty of warm sunny spells certainly across England and Wales. Having said that, still some showers to talk about for Friday night. They're drifting their way south-westwards and they're eventually easing. Then clear spells breaking out across England and Wales, whilst a weak weather front arrives into the northwest to bring some thicker cloud and some outbreaks of mostly light rain for western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland by dawn. Across England and Wales, with the clear spells, a few mist patches in places, and a cool start to the weekend with temperatures dipping to 3 or 4 Celsius. But it won't take long, with plenty of sunshine around first thing, for those temperatures to rise, and a fine spring day is expected across England and Wales. Generally light winds, sunny spells and feeling warm in the sunshine. Some brightness also across Scotland and Northern Ireland, in between a few outbreaks of light rain. Temperatures potentially reaching 20 Celsius around the Murray coast, otherwise mid to high teens
but the most extensive sunshine across England and Wales will bring highs of 22 degrees, away from the North Sea coast, that is, where it will stay a bit cooler. Then into Saturday afternoon and evening, we'll see low cloud across the west of Scotland become more extensive across Scotland and Northern Ireland, bringing some persistent spells of rain, some heavy bursts at first, but easing by the end of the night. That'll keep things mild in the north, but further south across England and Wales, clear skies, and again, temperatures dipping to 3 or 4 Celsius, a cool start to Sunday. But a repeat performance after that cool start, well, temperatures soon rise and plenty of warm sunny spells will break out. There'll be some patchy cloud in places, particularly around the North Sea coast and into central southern England, but otherwise plenty of fine weather for England and Wales, cloudier for Scotland and Northern Ireland, rain easing later.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK.